The tricolor banner of the Russian Republic now flies over the Kremlin. President Bush salutes the man who presided over the end of the Soviet Union and provides a solid basis for the United States to work in equally constructive ways with his successors. On Christmas Day, 1991, Soviet President Gorbachev gave the United States the best Christmas gift. He announced in a national speech that the Soviet Socialist Republic alliance would cease to exist. The Red Giant, which covered 22 million square kilometers, split into 15 countries and left the historical stage. In the past 30 years, discussions about the Soviet Union have never stopped. People are curious about why such a powerful superpower would not take over. People reflect on the mistakes of the Soviet Union and discuss the dark history of the Soviet Union. They are excited about Kruger and Lubyanka. But in the many criticisms of the Soviet Union, few people have talked about what made the Soviet Union so powerful. In fact, Russia's essence is in Russia and the United States. You can say that the Soviet Union, Ukraine, Karen Forest, and Kruger Islands are sinful, but you can't deny the great competitiveness of the Soviet Union. The Soviet Union has a lot of dark spots, but a country that can compete with the United States for half a century must have done something right. What is the United States, which has been at war with the Soviet Union for 46 years, when the Soviet Union has nothing to say? Only in the early 20th century, Russia were still the weakest link of imperialism. But how did such a country become the world's first to lead half the world decades later? We know that the United States and the Soviet Union are at war. But how did the Soviet Union's strength coalesce with the United States? In fact, the Soviet Union's strength is not in its tank and nuclear warheads, nor is it in its aviation and aerospace technology, or its perverted nuclear education system. These are just the Soviet Union's strength, not the Soviet Union's strength. When you mention the Soviet Union, you say that the Western Eighth Route Army is only about appearance, not essence. The United States has only feared one country since its birth, the Soviet Union. As powerful as Nazi Germany and Nazi Japan, Japan is the only country to attack the United States. And Germany bombed the whole of Europe. But the United States knew from the very beginning that they were bound to be crushed. In 1943, Roosevelt said at the Casablanca Conference, World War II would end with the unconditional surrender of the Nazis. At this time, the United States and Japan were still strong. But the United States had no doubt in its victory. And even to this day, the Soviet Union has been dead for 30 years. The big villain in American movies is still a Russian. Even though Russia's strength is now worse than that of the United States, the Americans are still afraid of this opponent. As the saying goes, the greatest respect in the universe is to kill as soon as possible. What the Americans are afraid of is not the Soviet nuclear weapons, not the Soviet tank and nuclear trap. The only thing the Soviet army can threaten is Europe, and the United States' nuclear power is no weaker than that of the Soviet Union. The basic reason why the Americans fear the Soviet Union is that the Soviet Union has an ideology that is enough to completely destroy the Western world. The ideology of communism is the core competitiveness of the Soviet Union. This competitiveness is unprecedented. Many people think that the Soviet Union is like a big Russian. This is completely wrong. The Soviet Socialist Republic Alliance is a nation without any geographical national color. This is extremely rare in human history. It is not Russia. It is not any national country. It is the only alliance in human history that has a national identity based on social systems. The ideology is its foundation. Now, when it comes to international communism, it is influenced by Western propaganda, and many people's views are sometimes biased. But there is a fact that everyone should admit. A social system, a kind of thought, if there is no considerable appeal, is not enough to make tens of millions of people willing to give their lives for it. In the snowfields of China's northeast, in the cities of Western Europe, in the rainforests of Latin America, on the highlands of Africa, comrades from different countries and different nations who speak different languages shake hands with each other because they have the same worldview and are willing to fight for the same goal. A country 10,000 miles away can support the rule of another country without any interest of the organization. This has never happened in the history of the past. Most of these people may have never dealt with Spain in their lives, but they are willing to join the Spanish international team under the call of communism. It is difficult for people in the 21st century to understand the spirit of after the Cold War, because the United States fully controlled the international speech circle. A lot of people naively thought that American values were the only universal values. Democracy and freedom seemed to be tied to the American system. It is difficult for people today to imagine how intense the disputes between the two ideologies during the Cold War were. It should be known that the confidence in the American system is not a one-time thing. There is only a gradual process. After World War I, the United States gradually realized the advantages of the system. After World War II, the United States firmly recognized the advantages of the system. And the victory of the Cold War made the United States recognize that its system was universal. But this confidence in the system is a process of constant strengthening. It is not born with such confidence. Unlike national states, the United States does not have a sense of national identity. Its complex national composition makes the internal cultural difference huge. And the values that maintain the existence of the United States are its benefits. You can complain to the Americans that their life is unhealthy, that they do not have a cultural background. They will even complain to you. But if you question the Americans about their so-called freedom and democracy, they will definitely take it away. And when freedom meets fairness, when universal values meet the liberation of mankind, is the most frightening moment for the Americans. Before the collapse of the Soviet Union, the Soviet Union's leadership was no worse than that of the United States. At least before the 1970s, its attractiveness was equal to that of the United States. A country created by the working people, without capitalists, without nobles, founded on backward killing. It resisted the siege of Europe as soon as it was born. It developed under the blockade and quickly realized industrialization through its 5-year plan. It took 20 years from the weakest link of imperialism to become the first major industrial country in Europe. During the global economic crisis between 1929 and 1933, only the Soviet Union continued to grow rapidly. What kind of script is this? This is the script of the internet. And after World War II, the Soviet Union broke down the unpredictable German fascism, set up the Berlin capital, and liberated half of the European people. After World War II, the economy continued to develop rapidly. Rockets went up to the sky, submarines went into the sea. The first manned rocket, the first man-made satellite, the first space station, the first lunar detector. In the case of hostility, it still won 15 Nobel Prizes and 440 Olympic gold medals. No matter how the West slanders the Soviet Union, no one can deny these solid achievements. Yuri Gagarin is not only a hero of the Soviet Union, he is also a hero of mankind. He is still popular in Europe and the United States. For modern people, they may not experience the encouragement of the Soviet Union to the working people at that time. It's just a trick. The existence of the Soviet Union proves one thing. The working people never depreciate. Without capitalists, no nobles, no emperors, no feudal lords, the working people can still create great achievements. After all, in the thousands of years before the Soviet Union was born, history is just a feudal lord. About this, there is a very powerful proof. From Stalin to Gorbachev, almost all senior officials in the Soviet Union were born civilians. Stalin is the son of a leather craftsman. Molotov was born in a family of electricians. Galinin is the son of a Ukrainian farmer. Mikoyan is the son of a carpenter. Boris Nevsky is the son of a field worker. Khrushchev is the son of a railway worker. Andorov Chernenko is the son of a farmer. Even Gorbachev and Yeltsin are the sons of farmers. Before the Soviet Union collapsed, the members of the Soviet Central Committee also had overwhelming advantages. In the group of intellectuals, a lot of left-wing intellectuals regarded the Soviet Union as the land of the workers. How strong is the Soviet Union's appeal? Since the 1930s, the United States and Europe have always been infiltrated by the Soviet intelligence system like a sieve. These spies are not bought with money, but are voluntarily formed by people who support communism. The Soviet Union's infiltration of the United States has reached a level that is unimaginable. The Manhattan Project in World War II is too secretive. As the 10th Vice President, Truman did not even know about this plan. After Roosevelt passed away, he learned that the United States was engaged in atomic bombs. At the Poznan Conference, Truman told Stalin that the United States was developing a powerful weapon. Stalin laughed. Truman thought Stalin was arrogant and didn't understand anything. But in fact, Stalin not only knew about the Manhattan Project, but also knew earlier than Truman that it was through Soviet spies in the United States. Understanding this phenomenon, you should understand that the struggle between the United States and the Soviet Union is a life-and-death struggle. There is no room for compromise. In the traditional sense, if the Soviet Union is not the Soviet Union but the Shah, it is completely unnecessary to compete with the United States globally. The Earth is big enough to hold two big pots. And the global struggle has no meaning, especially the Soviet Union. Every year, in order to fight, the money and power spent can hardly be counted in numbers. The United States also paid a huge price for this. The reason why the Cold War broke out is because the United States and the Soviet Union, a pair of twin sons of human modern civilization, have reached a crossroads that determines the fate of mankind. Both countries think their own path is right. They all think they have a duty to lead all mankind towards light. To see the Cold War between the United States and the Soviet Union as an interest struggle between imperialism is to look down on these two great civilizations. From 1947 to 1991, it was the fastest development in human history for half a century. During this time, the two camps fought who was the better social system. This greatly promoted human progress. It can be said that there is no greater struggle in the Cold War compared to the struggle now. The Cold War is a struggle for who is better. In order to prevent communism from spreading in several directions, Western countries made huge concessions. During the Cold War, the gap between the United States and Europe has always remained at a relatively low level. Europe has established a perfect welfare system. Before World War II, the cruel exploitation of workers was exposed. And it's all because of what Che Guevara said. After we leave, they will build schools and hospitals for you. They will raise your salary. This is not because of their conscience. It's not because they've become good people. It's because we've been there. This is the strongest enemy in human history. The Soviet Union may not be good enough, but its existence alone is enough to push the entire capitalist world and human civilization forward. In terms of science and technology, the Soviet Union sent the Gagarin to space, set up a space station, and built the first piece of human space territory. And the United States took a step further and carried out the Apollo project and sent humans to the moon. In civil science, human medicine has made great progress. All kinds of inventions can be approved. Crazy inventions like superfast technology can only be uploaded during the Cold War. The United States has created a variety of new home appliances because every new invention can add glory to American life. At that time, the United States was a real beacon. Science and technology investment is huge. It helps Europe to dismantle the colonial system. This is to promote human progress. As the United States and Europe gradually establish a full-fledged welfare society, the living standards of the Soviet people are also skyrocketing. In terms of medicine, Solzhenitsyn was still an old-timer in 1954. The local hospital in Tashkent can even cure his lung cancer. The level of medical care in the Soviet Union is obvious. The public health care system has become a way of life for the people of the Soviet Union. The nursing homes all over the country have become a feature of the Soviet Union. While ensuring 8-hour working hours, the Soviet Union has turned a lot of high-end hobbies into popular hobbies, such as ballet. It was a typical aristocratic hobby, but it became a popular culture in the Soviet Union and greatly improved the aesthetic level of the people. People who are familiar with the Soviet Union will find that many ordinary Soviet workers basically have a second hobby, such as Hanzo night school or shooting and parachuting. For example, the Soviet female astronaut used to be a parachutist. The reason for this kind of life is because the Soviet Union has ensured 8-hour working hours in this regard. You can learn about the high-intensity and high-speed education system of the Soviet pervert and the super high mathematical level of the people. At the same time as him, The European and American education system has also cultivated a large group of experts and has produced great figures. The period when the Soviet Union lacked 1 hour working hours was mainly in the street. Allen era and the last few years before the disintegration. In fact, there is no choice, but the standard of living is definitely not bad. During the Cold War, the world's no. 1 cotton product, the world's no. 1 sugar product, the world's number 1 milk consumption, the world's number 2 the Soviet joke, although it is a precious spiritual heritage of mankind. Do not think that a country with a shortage of 1 hour will become the world's no. 1 from the point of view of social life. The Soviet people's living standards are lower than those of the United States and lower than those of Western Europe and Japan, but basically the highest living standards except for the first time, During the Khrushchev period, Khrushchev and Nixon had a famous kitchen debate at that time. The Soviet people's living standards increased rapidly, although the Khrushchev building was smelly. It solved the Soviet people's housing needs. More importantly, it was issued for free by the state. Khrushchev's theory is in the Soviet Union, everyone can get a house while the poor in the United States can only sleep on the street. This is a very realistic problem if there is not enough confidence. Who dares to live better than the Americans? The social life of the two sides has advantages and disadvantages. The Americans have sufficient and exquisite commodity supply. More importantly, the efficiency is higher and the Soviet Union is in a fair situation. There is no obvious gap between the rich and the poor, and its more stable unemployment rates can almost be ignored. There is no economic crisis, but the shortcomings of the Soviet system are also very obvious. Highly planned economy has led to serious resource waste. People's needs are suppressed for a long time. The quality of goods is poor. Science and technology achievements are converted into specific products. The cycle is long. The economy is slow, so it gradually falls into a downturn. The shortcomings of American life are the cyclical economic crisis and unemployment risks. For example, the Middle East oil crisis is a bit of a problem, but the advantages of the American market economy are always huge. American workers during the Cold War can do one-man work and feed their families. This is the best proof. It is also the golden age that Americans still miss, of course. After the collapse of the Soviet Union, don't think about this kind of day. After all, there is no need to give in to the workers. The planned economy system of the Soviet Union is a system that is too advanced. The internal resource configuration is unequal. The military and industrial sectors have been kidnapping the national economy for a long time. People's living standards have been stagnant for a long time after meeting basic needs. Lack of choice and enjoyment. The poor quality of Soviet products contributed a lot, but in addition to the end of the Soviet Union, the problem of the Soviet people is always good. It's not about whether it's good or not. In 1979, Dongda made a fan film called The Minister's Car. It's about a private car of a worker in Dongda. It's too old. By chance, he changed an old minister's car. So there's a series of funny stories. The purpose of the film is to mock the corruption of Dongda, but even so, you can see a fact. In 1979, Dongda ordinary workers can afford a private car. As the son of the Soviet Union, you can imagine the living standards of the socialist camp at the time. In terms of equal rights, the Cold War accelerated the equal rights of the whole earth. After the birth of the Soviet Union, the global level of women's rights has increased significantly because gender equality is one of the core ideas of the Soviet Union. Women participate in a lot of work in the Soviet Union. The first female pilot, the first female sniper, the first female aviator, etc. became a representative of the world and women's rights and the West. During the Cold War, there has also been a huge improvement. The United States abolished the South and North War, a century-long racial isolation system. Black people have the first time in their lives equal treatment with white people. This is inseparable from the background of the Cold War and the global colonial system collapsed. During the US-Soviet Union, a large number of national states became independent. The United Nations in decades, more than 50 up to nearly 200. The independence of these countries can't leave the US-Soviet Union. People all over the world began to pick up their weapons, resist the colonizer. In short, the world of the Cold War is such an era, a rapid technological advance, equal rights and rapid development. The gap between the rich and the poor shrinks. Life quality improvement, a generation of modernization, a generation of popularization. A capitalist dare not arbitrarily deprive workers. A globalization dare not arbitrarily deprive the third world. Is a human being a great era that is gradually getting rid of chains and such an era, but it's sitting on the gunpowder barrel of the nuclear war. Destruction may be in the next second. The brightest progress with the darkest reality exist at the same time. This is the contradiction of the Cold War. After the end of the Cold War, the United States never again a CRA. ZY plan like Apollo because there is no power in the global range. The gap between the rich and the poor, the gap between the rich and the poor expand rapidly. Buffett Soros, this kind of big evil can be taken out as a global idol, and the third world countries one by one, the shackles of Western countries in the globalization, the stripped warrior can't turn over, and all this because the Soviet Union is gone. The Cold War is over. The one who dares to speak for the workers, the superpower is gone. If the international workers are still there, Hong Kong's capitalists dare to put the living people into the House of Guan Sonda. Before the 90s, the price of a house in Hong Kong jumped several times, jumped into cabbage. Why? After the 90s, there has never been such a thing. Dead people don't talk, the people of tea. He post-war can be shot like a clown movie. Identify the dead giant at, well, maybe in the rest of my life we can still see the U.S. military conquers Berlin. The Soviet Union and Germany become the record of the central country. The Soviet Union's dark history, Gulag, the Great Rebellion, all kinds of Soviet jokes I don't deny for his dark history. What should be criticized must be criticized, but no one should deny the spirit of justice of the Soviet Union, a great civilization. There must be a great spirit supporting a country that see and become a superpower. There must be a great spirit and mission. Be his backer. 3 superpowers in human history: the British Empire, the United States and China, and the Soviet Union Socialist National Alliance. They are all for human civilization progress, has irreplaceable promotion. Then such a powerful country, why would it eventually disintegrate? The former Soviet Union is the old brother of the world's proletarians, is the workhorse of the workers, and the country where Blag abandoned the Iranian People's Party to the Socialist Brothers, the country that moves the knife that's a red shark with 5 claws. No matter how powerful he is, you're just a soulless, and the elites of the Soviet Union more eager to share with the people the power of a country. Soviet era, the corruption of the Soviet H-ranking officials, it's just a smuggling of some cheap goods. But after the Soviet Union collapsed, countless heads were born in Russia. Let the Soviet people know the real meaning of corruption until he day before the Soviet Union collapsed. His army is also invincible, but a country that betrays its own soul will inevitably be swept by history's stubborn opposition, the one who became a dragon of Kor. See, it's going to die, but that doesn't mean we have to forget his courage. We look at his birth, look at his growth, under his influence strengthened himself. I've been fighting with him for years in the E&D. He told us with his own death how to live a better life. Moscow, Red Square, Katyusha of the PLA. We love each other. Old friends who have been killing each other for 70 years sent a song the last night. Thank you for your 3 years. I'm Shauhan Khan. I'll tell you a story every week. See you next time.